Hi, hello, it's Audrey Kadri. I'm gonna glisten in this video, just so you know. It's very hot, I'm trying to go fast. So I just finished season 5 of Riverdale, and I had to talk about it. I couldn't wait till season 6 drops on Sunday. I gotta get all this out now. First, I need to explain how I got into this show. So years ago, back when this first season was first put on Netflix, my sister sat me down and made me watch 1 or 2 episodes with her. And I, after that, just begged her to turn it off because it was awful. We couldn't get through it, and eventually she ended up just acting out some of the later scenes, and we laughed, and then we moved on. Flash forward to 2020. I am now in college, quarantining with roommates, and the 4th season of the show drops on Netflix. 2 of my roommates were fans, and were starting to watch the 4th season, but they were the kind of people who like to also make fun of it. So not wanting to be left out, I watched it with them, and I actually started to kind of get into the show. It was still stupid, but it was more entertaining than I expected it to be. And by that point, I had already seen the memes, I'd seen the compilation videos of like Riverdale on crack, and so I thought that I would never watch it, but I ended up getting really invested and went back and watched the previous 3 seasons. And then it just kind of stuck and it became a fixation, and I would just watch it over and over again. So that's how I got into the show. At first I hated it, and then I was watching it ironically, and then I started to like it. I still recognize that it was stupid. It was stupid in an enjoyable way. So this video is gonna be kind of all over the place. It's gonna be mainly a rant about season 5. I'm just gonna kind of jump around from the notes that I wrote while I was watching it. I'm not even going to try to get a lot of footage from the show because Riverdale does not deserve that kind of effort from me, and it would be a pain in the ass. So I will either use pictures or I will act out some scenes. I'm not going to get too detailed on my opinions of the previous seasons because I don't think there's much that I can say that hasn't already been said. So here's a quick recap of how I feel about seasons 1 through 4. First, we'll go over the stuff I like. I don't think the performances are too terrible. I mean, sometimes they're a little wacky, but I mean, I've never had too much of a problem with the performances, especially surprisingly from the parents, like of the main teens. The first season feels very artistic and like cinematic. I really like when TV shows do this and like, you know, they try to make a good first impression. It looks really good. It feels like they're actually trying. So I appreciate season 1 for that. I really like that they flesh out Alice's character specifically so that you know what her motivations are besides her just being like a crazy controlling Karen. And especially with what happens in season 5, it just gets really sad. And I didn't expect to like her as much as I did. Betty is obviously my favorite. I think she's got some of the more interesting storylines, although I wish they did more with her, and I will get into that later. Never really been a fan of Archie. He's just not interesting. Jughead is fine. Veronica's fine, but like she seems to be stuck in a loop. Like so many of her scenes are just her talking to her dad, her mom, Archie, Reggie. She's always running in circles and kind of doing the same things over and over again, and I just wish that she could do other things. And one thing that I feel like seasons 1 through 4 handled better than season 5 is that there was like a stronger through line, like a main story that like each of the characters were kind of participating in. So yeah, that was like super quick. That's, you know, as much as I have to say about seasons 1 through 4. Now let's get to season 5. So episode 1 feels normal. You know, season 4 at the end had set up like there's the, what's his name? The auteur. And he's like going around town filming and like, ooh, what's that gonna be? And it seems like a real threat, especially because at this point our characters have done things maybe they don't want other people to know or have a record of. It was interesting. I was excited for that to like go somewhere. And then it turned out like, oh, it was Jellybean, and she just wanted her big brother to stay in town, and that was really frustrating. And it was weird because it was like, I don't know if the production had problems or what the behind the scenes looked like, because it was a weird decision to like start this story at the end of season 4, pick it up in season 5, and then abruptly end it, and then go on a 7-year time gap. I also think it's hilarious that Cheryl's mom is like, hey, our extended family is causing problems for you, Cheryl, so I killed them all, and I'm taking myself to jail now, bye. Like I could think of no better example of how fast everything just is like shut down so we can get to the time jump. The weird thing about the time jump is that these actors already looked hilariously too old for the ages they were playing, so that there's hardly any difference seeing them after 7 years. You know, it jumped forward and I felt nothing. Like no one really looks like any time has passed except for Jughead. And he looks like he's in trouble. Like someone get this man to therapy. And I just don't know why they didn't start the season this way. Because like, you know, if the audience had to actually experience like 1 or 2 years waiting for the next season, it would have felt like a lot of time had passed. But it didn't. It felt like nothing. Oh, I'm all over the place. Oh my God, this show just, it does things to me. Every scene in season 5 just feels so formulaic, you know, like it's, and almost exactly the same length. Like it lasts just long enough for you to settle into things and then it cuts to a new thing. Like here's an example. I will act out a fight between Veronica and her new hubby, Chad. Veronica will be portrayed by Spider-Man and Chad will be portrayed by Thanos.
Remember how it was in the beginning? Things were so good. You and me working side by side on the floor. We were the power couple to beat. And the sex was amazing. What happened? The accident. Chad, you used the accident as an excuse to try and control. You almost died. So did you. You didn't want me going back to Wall Street after the accident because it was too stressful. And I didn't want to keep having the same argument over and over again, so I agreed. But that was a mistake. That's not who I am. And the sooner you accept that, the better off you'll be.
And that's the exact dialogue from the scene. Yay. So because we had a time jump, there's now a lot of expository dialogue, which is also really funny because no one talks this way. I mean, the writers were already pretty good at writing characters who don't sound like human beings, but now it's just like even more funny. Like there's this scene with Jughead and he's like walking in a park with his agent. And he's like, am I still in the running for that New Yorker job? Thanks for catching us up there, Jug. Okay, one of the first scenes that we see is Archie, and he's in like the high school locker room, and then it goes out and it's like he's on the field playing football, but it's also war. Don't have any experience with either of those things. I don't know anything about war or football, but I don't think this scene was intended to make me laugh. And yet, also, if you want to play a fun drinking game, drink every time you hear them use that boom sound effect to like accentuate whatever's going on. It's everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, how many times am I going to have to listen to this? Some of the editing is just so wild to me. Like twice in this season, they use a comedy record scratch and neither of those times does it feel natural. And there's another point where Josie and the Pussycats are performing, like they do a little wink and they do the wink sound effect. And I don't know, maybe they did that in the previous seasons. It's been a while, but it just feels so out of place. It's almost like they're not even trying to like suspend your disbelief. It's like you're just painfully aware that you're watching a TV show and you just can't take any of it seriously. Another thing I wasn't a fan of was that they were really rehashing previous like plot threads. Like I'm just kind of sick of seeing Hiram Lodge, and I was surprised that they made him the bad guy again, and like he actually succeeded in taking over the town and they gotta stop him again. Oh no. They even did like another Vixen's dance off with Cheryl, and then like the whole Cheryl making people hook up with each other, which didn't go anywhere. And it's just like not even interesting because nothing happens. Like even though I guess like it's realistic for these characters to react this way to her doing that because they're adults and they're not like dumb teenagers anymore. It's like they chickened out, you know? You played it up like this is gonna be crazy, OMG, and basically had an opportunity to write fan fiction of your own show and like get some weird character pairings and like, well, what are they gonna talk about? Are they gonna kiss? What's gonna happen? And then you're just like, nah, let's just pair up everybody who's already sleeping together and then that's it. They go home. So let's get into the things that I liked. It's not a very long list, but you know. So I was skeptical of this at first because it also feels like fan fiction, but I did eventually warm up to the idea of these characters becoming teachers at Riverdale High. Veronica and her class were nice. Archie and the RROTC and the football guys were good. I think Jughead being a depressed English teacher was underused, but okay. I would have liked to see more of this, but as the season went on, everyone's teaching responsibilities just kind of vanished. I don't even know, do we even see the high school again at some point? I don't remember. Watching this season left me in kind of a daze. I just blew through it really fast and maybe I should have paced myself. I'm happy for Fangs and Kevin, even though they split them up. I was happy that they were together and it seemed like the relationship was written very naturally and given like weight and realism. I also like that Tony is in the season more and she has stuff to do. And I feel like the representation was pretty okay here. Like it's, you know, Riverdale, so anytime the gay or bisexual stuff comes up, I kind of put up my armor a little bit because I'm expecting them to handle it badly, but it was fine. At the end of each scene that had stuff like that, I was like, okay. Again, I do like the character development of Alice. You really feel for her in this season. God, she's just lost everything. I thought that their musical episode was not as cringy as it could have been. I thought it was decently integrated into the story, and I like that it, you know, is centered on Alice. Felt like a little bit more emotionally connected. Again, kind of the bare minimum, but not terrible. I like that Reggie becomes Hiram's right-hand man because he basically like succeeds where Archie failed. And I think he was like kind of the right choice from the start. You know, you've got Reggie and Veronica working together. Like you can just see that like, yeah, Reggie will do things that Archie won't. So it just kind of makes sense. Weirdly, this is the biggest thing, I don't hate Archie this season. Like maybe it's because he's not really with Veronica, or maybe it's because he actually has shit to do. I don't know what it is, because he does stuff in previous seasons and maybe it's a lack of angst. Like he feels a lot more mature and grounded. You really feel his purpose, you know? It's a lot more realistic. Honestly, Archie reminds me of like a character for a video game because he has all these like skills. He does all these random things. He's just like a generic good guy. He's got like just enough personality that he passes as a character, but he's blank enough that you could kind of put yourself in his shoes. That's why I get like that weird video game character vibe from him. He's like not super interesting when he's trying to be a songwriter or a boxer or a strong boy farm boy. I don't know, he just feels a lot more grounded here compared to previous seasons. The characters they have him interact with really work. I like Eric. I also like that they addressed his PTSD from the war times. I think they did pretty good with that whole plot thread. I realize a lot of that stuff again is like the bare minimum, but by Riverdale standards, it's a thumbs up from me. The season also had some pretty good jump scares, which I was not expecting, like the one with Betty and TBK, the trash bag killer, which is such a stupid name. And then Jughead with the aliens, and I'll get to the aliens because what the fuck? Here's the overall vibe that I was getting from this season. It just feels really surreal. I watched this on 1.5 speed, and maybe that contributed to it, but it just like, it kind of feels like, you know, you have a dream and it doesn't really have like a story. It's just like a bunch of random images or scenes, and when you're in it you like understand what's going on, like you get it, but when you wake up you try to like remember and piece it together again and you're just like, I have no idea. That's kind of how this season left me. It kind of just seeps into the entire show, you know? Like these characters are just barely passing for representations of real people, but they don't feel real. They don't feel like well-written characters. Again, it's like the whole suspension of disbelief thing. And you know, the whole timeline blurring as well, where you're like, you've got cars from the 50s and you've got that kind of vibe, but then you've also got iPhones. Maybe that's contributing to it. None of it felt real. And I don't know why. Another thing that I noticed is like the lighting kind of felt weird. It was a much like more noticeable drop in quality. Like it felt like, oh, I'm looking at people on a set instead of people in the actual space that we're meant to believe that they're in. And maybe that contributed to the surrealness of it. I honestly just wish that this show would make up its fucking mind. Like follow just one of these plot threads that's the most interesting and let it breathe and flesh it out. And it's definitely the Betty one because hers are always the most interesting, but we're cutting away to do stupid shit. By season 5, they should have found their footing, but it feels like it's wasting time, you know? Like, ooh, Betty's doing FBI shit. Let's watch her solve the case at a snail pace in tiny pieces because we have to cut away to Cheryl painting forgeries because that's super interesting. It's just so frustrating. It doesn't feel like it knows what it wants to be. And it's its 5th season. Okay, here I have written sex scenes. I just don't care anymore. Amen. Not like I really cared originally. Sex scenes are just really funny. There's people who are like, oh, I don't know where to look. But if you're invested and you're watching, then you also feel weird and like a creep, especially when you know that these are teenagers for the majority of the show's run. By season 5, your eyes just kind of glaze over when Betty and Archie are making out in the shower. Another reason why the time jump feels meaningless is adulthood doesn't really affect these characters much. Like, I don't feel like they grew up and went on to do bigger and better things. Like, Veronica was already running a business and facing off against her father as a teenager, and now she's doing the same shit again. She's the she-wolf of Wall Street. Wow, I really loved hearing that phrase over and over again. Archie is being a generic good guy, jack of all trades, strong boy, farm boy. We've seen that before. The only real difference is with Betty, but it's kind of detrimental. It's like a step backwards. Betty is an adult now, and she can do things that adults do. She has the power of an FBI agent or an agent in training. Like before, she had obstacles because she was a teenage, you know, Nancy Drew detective girl. But after the time jump, she doesn't get a pass from the fact that she's a minor anymore. Like, her story was limited because as a teenager, you don't have as much power to go and do things, and you have to kind of be more creative with how you get around those obstacles. But now, she doesn't have those obstacles, and her story is still limited by stupid shit. And that also means that she's more accountable for the dumb shit that she does, because she's an adult. I'm pretty sure that things that she does in this season are illegal and she shouldn't be allowed to become an agent, maybe. But she basically has no consequences and doesn't really have a hard time hiding the bad things that she's done. And in the end, she's rewarded for it and gets to run the Riverdale FBI office. And it was just super disappointing. I was really disappointed because Betty was my favorite character and she got to do really cool things when she was a teenager. And now it's just like, it's just so boring. This season was so boring. Betty has so much wasted potential. You know, like she had that dark serial killer thing that was dropped. There was hints of like her being unable to form normal relationships with her family members like Juniper and Dagwood because she started to become suspicious that they would be evil. The show's style was toned way down, especially with Betty. Previous seasons she had more power and was more of a badass when she was a teenage detective than when she's an FBI agent. She hasn't really progressed as a character. She just feels the same, which is super disappointing. Cheryl also seems super underused. The theme of like family trauma is really underexplored. Like if you look a little deeper and examine her worldview and how that informs her choices, you can see that it's twisted because of this trauma. That's something that like season 1 set up really well. By season 5, Cheryl only has one family member left thanks to her mom. Well, I guess her mom does come back later. But for the majority of the season, she's stuck with the exposition dumping machine Nana Rose. So by this point, she should start the rocky journey of wrestling with her trauma and trying to heal, or if not, resisting it and watching herself perpetuate the cycle of violence. Or they could go even deeper on her fear of the curse, drag her deeper into that pit and force her to claw her way out or succumb to it. But no, they don't do that either. Another thing Cheryl is used for early in the show is causing chaos and like playing with people's lives for fun or out of boredom. I would have liked to see more of like trickster, anti-hero, morally gray Cheryl. I also would have liked if they made up their damn minds with what they had her do, instead of starting and ending random shit over and over again and taking time away from other stories that were developing. Like at first she's a recluse and she doesn't want to go outside or halt construction because she's a knockoff Sarah Winchester. Then she's forging paintings. Then, oh, never mind, she's gonna go outside now, and turns out it wasn't that big of a deal for her. And okay, she's fighting for control of the Vixens. Wait, never mind, now she's running a cult with her mother who is back from jail and they worship Jason but also nature, and Cheryl can pray to the elements and perform miracles and control bees. It's like they keep throwing things at her because they don't know what they want her to do and they're just trying to like keep her busy. It's dragging down the rest of the show. You know, there's some really interesting groundwork here. You know, I would watch an entire show just about Cheryl and Tony just like I'd watch an entire show about Betty. God, it's just so stupid. I'm so tired. Another thing this show achieves and then squanders is actually getting me to care about and be interested in characters that I wouldn't otherwise like, particularly the female characters. For whatever reason, I don't know why I'm like this, I am like overly critical of women I see on TV or in movies. Maybe that's because a lot of them are poorly written or because of my own personal baggage. I tend to be a lot more critical and judge and dislike female characters. But in this show, these ladies are interesting, they're distinct from one another, they have cool stories and things that they could possibly do. I like the actresses. And then they waste time. And they squander all of the potential that they could have. Another thing about Veronica, I'm kind of jumping around here, but another thing about Veronica is she always has solutions because she has money and power. She always saves the day. And that's like a huge part of season 5 because a lot of it is like the town doesn't have money because of Hiram Lodge. And then they're like, well, let's go to Veronica and then sometimes Cheryl because they've got money. I don't know. I kind of wanted to see her become like a villain. Like that would be way more interesting. It goes back to my other point of like Veronica just kind of spins in circles. Also, can we just for 1 second stop throwing plot stuff in with no buildup? Like the prison break, where did that come from? Like the show swings between being unable to convey information and info dumping. They're just like, no, we're gonna do this now. It's just, you get whiplash. I'm losing my words. The fight against the trucker with Betty is one of the stupidest scenes I've ever seen. Like I watched the show on 1.5 speed, but it felt so slow and clunky and just outright stupid. Like you are an FBI agent and you're gonna turn your back on the guy that you just knocked out. It was like, okay, now let's make her dumb and put her in danger because we need him to slice through the cabin of the truck with a chainsaw. Oh my God. Okay, so we're getting to the end of my list here. Something that's been on my mind recently is a comparison between Stranger Things and Riverdale. Because when I watched Stranger Things season 4, I recognized some similarities and some of the exact same story beats that Riverdale tried to do, but I found myself enjoying them on Stranger Things way more. So I wanted to talk about this in a segment that I'm going to call Who Wore It Best? Stranger Things did. All right, bye. Thank you for watching the video. I'm just kidding. So the main things that I wanted to go over here are Stranger Things in Riverdale handling the topics of, the small town hysteria, the satanic panic, and D&D, and then some larger writing problems that I'll talk about later. Now, obviously, Stranger Things is a different show. It's trying to do slightly different things than Riverdale. Maybe there's differences budget-wise, I don't know. They've definitely got better writers. So first let's talk about that small town hysteria and the satanic panic. And we're gonna look at particularly the red circle that Archie creates and the football team from season 4 of Stranger Things. Riverdale feels like it is all talk, all swagger. Like lines are delivered, but it never feels sincere or convincing or grounded. Stranger Things has always been really good at nailing their characters and getting us to care about them, even with their side characters. Like you can understand the football captain guy's motivations. You get why these teenagers want to hunt down Eddie and make him pay for what they think he did. When this kid gets up and tries to rally the town with his speech, you get nervous. That's why when he shows up at the final hour and beats up Lucas, you get real nervous. And like, even though Archie Andrews could maybe punch this kid's lights out, when Archie makes his dumb little home movie about protecting the town and hunting down the Black Hood, you don't take him seriously. I think just the biggest difference is Stranger Things really understands its time period and it grounds it in reality. You get fully immersed in the world that they create in a way that Riverdale just fumbles. They just can't seem to do it. So moving on to the satanic panic and D&D in particular. My real beef with the writers of Riverdale is why they decided to demonize D&D for their plot in season 3. Because it's not like Riverdale actually gets into the supernatural and is like, oh, this particular campaign is cursed. That would be cool. But their only reason is the game is evil. As if being into D&D makes you obsessed with it to the point that you take people's lives or your own. Riverdale feels like the fictional town that an 80s mom would tell her children about to scare them away from playing D&D. It doesn't feel real. It's very devil worship-y and it's insulting. Like they could have gone all the way with just bringing the supernatural into the show, but no. They went the lazy route. On the other hand, with Stranger Things, a big part of season 4 of the show is that the town feels weary from the events of previous seasons. It feels cursed. Like as each season has progressed, the threats have gotten bigger and bigger and affected the town more and more. Until season 4, where it feels like things are just like hanging by a thread and like the tension is super high. Children are being murdered, people are scared, and they want to apprehend the guy they think is responsible. So it makes sense that in this town where freaky things are happening, they find out that the guy they think is responsible is into D&D and immediately make that leap to devil worship. And you totally believe it because this stuff actually happened in the real world. It's just so frustrating. I was really happy to see it handled well in Stranger Things. It felt like that much more satisfying, like it was righting a wrong that Riverdale had done. And finally, there's larger writing problems with Riverdale that Stranger Things just seems to handle a lot better. Not perfectly, because I think, there's always an issue when you have groups of characters splitting up the party, and having to balance where you spend your time and how much attention you give to these storylines, but also making them connected and engaging the viewer. Riverdale doesn't handle this well at all. It just feels like the show is wasting time. As soon as you're trying to get into the stuff you actually want to see, you cut away. I think if they had tried to, make a better, more cohesive story or mystery for season 5 for our characters to be involved with and kept them together in groups, then maybe we would have had a story that felt like a story. But instead, we have our main 5 largely kind of working independently from each other, doing different things, and like occasionally their paths cross. I feel like in previous seasons we had a lot more of Jughead and Betty and Archie and Veronica, and even if I didn't really like some of the stuff they did, at least they were together and like the group would get together and you felt like they were a group. If they're gonna play up the fact that like they're adults, it's not the same as high school, then they also need to lean into that and like emotionally develop it and not just keep them away from each other. It just feels like did they even resolve any of that stuff with Jughead and Betty? I don't remember. I just watched the show. It's so frustrating. The season kind of meandered aimlessly into an ending. It didn't flesh out the interesting stuff. It abruptly ended the things that I wanted to see with lame explanations that felt kind of cheap, and I felt like I was delirious the whole time. And it's weird because it's not even like things that are super crazy happened. It was pretty boring. And you know what? There's no better example of this than my reaction to Polly's death. Spoiler alert. The entire time Betty was investigating the Lonely Highway and trying to catch the trucker killer, another really dumb name, I thought they were gonna find Polly alive. Like I honestly believed that because the tension was just not there. And it honestly surprised me when she actually ended up being dead, because I didn't expect that, but I also wasn't emotionally affected by it. And also, something that I realized while I was scripting this is that the Mothmen suck and make no sense. Like, it's obvious from the beginning that it's not really aliens. It definitely has something to do with that weird old guy that Jughead talks to. Like, it's super obvious. It feels like the show is treating you like a little kid and expecting you to believe that there's actually aliens this time, even though they've never done anything like that before. They couldn't even go all the way with the supernatural D&D stuff. Oh, I'm sorry, G&G. God, that makes my skin crawl. I hate that. And I just wish that Riverdale would have taken the leap and just gotten ridiculous and actually brought aliens and shit into the world. Because if they're just a bunch of Blossom cousins, then what was up with the bright lights and the weird things happening? Like, is that ever explained? And if it was, it's not my fault for not knowing. It's the show's fault for not conveying the information well enough to me during a normal viewing experience, because I was left just as confused and bewildered as if I had actually been abducted by aliens. So when I was originally making my list and my thoughts about this show back when I was just watching seasons 1 through 4, I was trying to make the argument that I think the show is good and enjoyable and fun despite the stupid stuff. My opinion has kind of changed now. I don't think the show is good in the sense that it actually succeeds in anything it tries to do. I think it's sometimes good in that it's enjoyable and fun despite how stupid it is. I think I didn't enjoy the season as much because there wasn't enough of the right stupid in it. The right stupid is like a full season leading up to a main character's death, a mystery that's a through line for each episode, and he comes back and you're like, what? But it's fun and you're on board and you want to see how they did it. Or like a cursed game of D&D that's handled poorly, but at least it's entertaining. But season 5 was just like so boring, and it was like disconnected from itself. It didn't weave any of these stories together in an interesting way. I mean, that's why I like the teacher stuff, because at least all of the characters were doing the same thing at the same time and sometimes interacted with each other, but then that gets dropped later on. So that's the end of my script. I guess I forgot to write an outro. And honestly, it's fitting that this conclusion arrives very abruptly and feels kind of off and surreal, because that's how this show made me feel. I didn't expect season 5 to give me such different opinions. I'm really hot. It's hot in here. I really wanted to like this season. I know, season 6 is right around the corner, and it looks like there is some crazy shit that happens, and so, maybe they do finally take the leap, give me some ridiculous things to watch, and at least, make me feel like I'm alive. I guess we'll have to see. Thank you for watching. Sorry if this video was all over the place and felt kind of disconnected and weird. I need to turn on the fan, so I'm going to sign off. Double thumbs up, finger guns, high five.